Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Hey, Kate.
Hey, hi, Fahrusha. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
I think we got a slate first.
Okay.
Today is July 12th,
Okay.
2016,
Yes, already.
and it's our 34th show. Can you believe it?
No, that does seem incredible.
It is,
does.
and we are going strong here, especially today.
I know you're so excited about this.
Yes, I am really excited because today we have an amazing, amazing guest, a man who has written at least 5 books, a man that I am happy to call friend. I first ran across Russell Targ, our guest, when he was doing a discussion of his earlier book, which was called The End of Suffering in New York City. And that same night in that auditorium, which was packed that night to see Russell, he did some remote viewing experiments with the group. And lo and behold, I got, a good 90% of the first one and about 50 or more percent of the second one, and I was thrilled. Since then, I've taken remote viewing with he and Stephen Schwartz up at the Omega Institute. I've seen him at the International Remote Viewing Association convention in not Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then most recently at the Society for Scientific Exploration. Now, Russell Targ is a physicist and author who was a pioneer in the development of the laser and laser applications. He was co-founder of the previously secret Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 1970s and 80s. His work in this new area, called remote viewing, was published in Nature, the Proceedings of the Institute of Electric and Electronics Engineers, and the Proceedings of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Russell did graduate work in physics at Columbia University and is co-author of 9 books, well, I only have 5, I'm sorry, dealing with the scientific investigation of psychic abilities, most recently, The Reality of ESP, a physicist's proof of psychic abilities. In 1997, Russell Targ retired from Lockheed Martin Missiles and Space Company as a senior staff scientist, where he developed airborne laser systems for the detection of wind shear. Now, that should be of a lot of interest to you, Kate, being a pilot.
It certainly is. I don't want to know much about wind shear, not personally and not up and close, no.
He now pursues ESP research in Palo Alto, California, and teaches remote viewing worldwide. So please, let's welcome Russell Targ to Shattered Reality. Hi, Russell.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be with you. And the CIA would be very happy that you take a really deep breath before you say top secret program. That's the way they would like it.
Okay.
I wanted to emphasize that. So why, we've had a few people involved with remote viewing on this program previously, but we would still, for new listeners, maybe from the master himself, we would like to hear your definition of remote viewing.
Well, the most important thing that I want to tell you about remote viewing, while people are still interested, and that is remote viewing is so easy that even a scientist can do it. That you don't have to eat porridge at the feet of your guru or pay anybody thousands of dollars. Remote viewing and psychic abilities are natural abilities that we can all do to a greater or lesser extent. It's been forbidden in this society, so in the United States you don't have much remote viewing, but in places like Iceland or Holland, or even in the Soviet Union where you have lots of shamans, everybody's got a psychic grandmother. And the remote viewing we're talking about is the ability we have to quiet our minds and describe and experience what's going on in the distance or even in the future. So the most interesting thing about remote viewing is that in physics terms, it's a non-local ability. And what that means in English is that its accuracy and its reliability is independent of distance and of time. So it's no harder to describe something 3,000 miles away on my desk than it is to describe something across the street. Increasing the distance doesn't cause a problem at all.
And time?
And not only that, within reasonable times, that is, within hours, days, or weeks, it's no harder to describe something a week away than it is a contemporaneous event.
Why do you say that as time goes by, it becomes more difficult? What would you say is your understanding of the reason why it becomes more difficult?
Well, we're not sure that it becomes more difficult. The data shows that, there's less data for greater distances. At the laboratory at Princeton, at the Princeton Research Lab that Bob John ran, he was a dean of engineering, he showed that for hours, days, weeks, the reliability was just as good as contemporaneous. And when you go a month in advance, there are no signposts, no timelines available. So it's very hard to know where you're looking months or years in advance. So it appears, first of all, there's not a lot of data, so we shouldn't talk about it at all. But what it appears is that if you're trying to look months in advance, people tend not to get feedback at a later time.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And one way you do precognition is look into the future and see what kind of feedback you're going to get at a later time. And that accounts for a lot of precognition. You sort of describe at a later time what you're going to be seeing for feedback. But we know, and it's sort of a secret, that feedback is really not essential in precognition. It definitely helps, especially when you're learning. But for example, Pat Price was able to describe things hidden in the Soviet Union, and he died before anybody got any feedback.
Yes.
So feedback helps when you're learning, but it's not essential.
I don't think that the same is true going backwards in time. I remember I was tasked in a class to go backward. We weren't told it was backward in time, of course. Remote viewing, you're just giving coordinates or letters or numbers, any kind of arbitrary way to define the target. But it turned out to be the hill in Israel that they fought for. I'm trying to think of the name. It's not Ramadi, but it's got a name like that. The big fortress on the hill in Israel back in Roman times that fell to the Romans. And a number of people in the class, including myself, got hits on the target, which, were good, reasonably good, got the time, got the dress, and so forth. Maybe didn't get the actual battle, but did reasonably well with that. So apparently it doesn't have the same effect moving backwards.
Well, if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of this, I'm familiar with the mound you're talking about. I've also forgotten his name. And the Romans defeated them by having a big siege.
Right. That was.
And they starved many of them, and the rest of them committed suicide. Famous event that happened
Masada.
70 years after Christ. However, after you described this thing that was 2,000 years old, you then got feedback about it.
Yes, we did.
So, as a viewer, Stephen, perhaps Schwartz asked you, describe this place in ancient history that's familiar to all historians, very famous location. Tell me about it, what happened there. And you search for the Akashic records where all information is, the past and the future, and you find that the easiest place to get that information is in the slide you're going to see in 10 minutes.
Right, right.
So I've never done experiments looking into the past because you can't tell whether the person is looking thousands of years into the past or whether they're looking at the slide you're about to show them.
Correct. That's very true.
So we definitely know that it's no harder. So that if you're looking for historical events, those work as good as describing any slide. I mean, if some of the slides I have to show you are things scattered around New York City, and other ones are scattered around the pyramids and the hilltops in Israel, those are all equally easy to do because, in a sense, what you're doing is looking into your immediate future, and that works excellently.
Mm-hmm.
That as a remote viewer has no problem at all quieting her mind and describing the slide that she's going to see in 10 minutes. That's an experiment that works very, very well because you're, in a certain sense, you're quieting your mind. You're reading your own mind in the future. You're quieting your mind and say, in my awareness, I'm about to see an interesting picture. I'd like to quiet my mind and describe now that interesting picture I'm going to see in 10 minutes. And that's something that works very, very well because you're sitting up there in the front row and then your teacher will fill the screen with a beautiful, large color picture of something or other. And even though that's in your immediate future, that's a particularly easy thing to do.
Well,
an easier thing to do, which I would usually do before I show you slides. You may remember I asked you to describe what's in the paper bag that's on the table in front of you. What does it feel like? How much does it weigh? What is the texture? And I then give you all the different opportunities for experience of shape and weight and color and size and texture and so forth. So describing physical objects is even easier to describe than pictures, even though both of them are totally hidden from you.
yes, and that sort of brings people into multisensory data rather than just thinking about a single thing, which is sight, which is remote viewing. One thinks immediately of sight. At this point, I have to tell you, Russell, that I think that you are a wonderful remote viewing teacher. Not only that, but I think that you are like a psychic intermediary because everybody in the class was doing really, really well up there in Omega with you. People were getting the targets partially or fully. So it was really very, very impressive.
But don't you find...
Well, I have a lot of experience. See, at SRI, my job was to sit in the dark with the viewer of that day and help that viewer learn to quiet his or her mind and describe where somebody was hiding. They could be hiding in the San Francisco Bay Area, or they could be in another country, or I could be looking for a submarine or a airplane. And it was always my job to help this unsuspecting visitor. See, the visitor always had the idea that they were going to come and see something psychic. And their idea is that we would pop Madame Catherine out of the closet and she would do the psychic stuff and they would watch. That's what they expected.
Uh-huh.
But in reality, they would wind up sitting with me in a darkened room. And I said, well, actually, you're the remote viewer, and I will help you. I, of course, don't know the answer. I don't know anything about the answer, but I will guide you because I have some experience. I know what remote viewing sounds like, and I will guide you to that part of your awareness that reveals the answer. And I did that for a decade. So I became quite familiar with how to do that. So in a certain sense, my spiritual path was paid for by the CIA. It's a very unusual situation. I got to sit in the dark for 10 years with my eyes shut, helping people get in touch with their own psychic ability and timeless awareness. Buddhists would say that who you are is not what you see in the mirror in the morning.
No,
and that's good news for most of us. Most of us would rather be something different than what we see in the mirror. And the Buddhists teach that who you are is timeless awareness, your consciousness that exists and persists in space independent of time. And if you do that enough of the remote viewing, of course, is not a spiritual path, but if you do enough remote viewing, you decide that there is a spiritual or non-local aspect of your awareness that's available to you.
And you really went into the spiritual side of it, if you will, in the book, The End of Suffering, that you did with J.J. Hurtak.
Yes, we did.
And
what we're teaching there mainly is the teaching of the great Buddhist logician at the time of Christ named Nagarjuna. And what he said is that your suffering is all due to Aristotle. As Aristotle said, that a thing is either true or it's not true. It's either a book or it's not a book. That's what Aristotle said. He taught the famous law of the excluded middle. There is no middle ground.
Uh-huh.
And what Nagarjuna said is that almost everything is neither true nor not true. So there's a lot of fighting in the world is between people who think that I've got the answer and you have the wrong answer, and there's no answer other than the one that I have, and that creates a lot of suffering for everybody.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of a famous answer that you gave on another podcast when someone asked you a question about flying saucers or UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them. And you said very calmly, well, I'm sure that something like that is true, something like that. And I'll never forget that. That was a good answer.
Yeah, on the subject of flying saucers, I'm sure that there's something like flying saucers, and I'm sure the government is lying about them. Those are the two things that I'm sure of.
Well, we're with you on that one, Russell.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't you find that some people have just a more innate ability, just as some people are a little bit better at music or art or certain aspects of humanity? So I think what you probably are doing is really calling out the best of the best. I get that impression from you, Fahrusha, from what you talk about these sessions that you attend. For example,
yeah, I certainly agree with that some people are more psychic than others, just the way, as you said, just the way as some people are more musical than others. But if you'll remember, when you were a girl, everybody you knew had a piano in the living room.
Right.
Playing the piano was totally ordinary, and especially every young lady was expected that she'd be able to read music and play acceptably. So we would say that somehow in the 1930s and 40s, remote viewing was ubiquitous. Everybody had the ability, and somehow the ability has gone away, and now only special people play the piano. How could that be? And the reason is because there was a time when there was no television, no radio. The only entertainment you had was gathering around the piano.
That's correct.
And everybody could play somewhat, and we all recognized that some people played better than others.
I was advised to take up the drums.
I,
But yeah, absolutely. But there's this one figure that Fahrusha was talking to me about, and he seems like he was extremely accomplished, a Mr. Pat Price.
Oh, Pat Price is probably the greatest psychic that we ever saw.
Really?
He was a retired police commissioner from the city of Burbank. And his first remote, he called us up, and said, I've been hearing about your work. Some of the stuff was published, some was secret. And what we had were geographical coordinates of something or other that our CIA contract matter had given us. And we said, well, we'll give you these coordinates. We don't know what they pertain to, but you can look. I was just suddenly surprised that a large black cat just leaped up on my desk and stole my thought from me.
Maybe it's you're familiar.
That's right. And Pat Price coming to visit us.
Yeah, Pat Price is in spirit. He's with us. He knows how interested I am in his life as a psychic remote viewer. He was really top notch.
So you were given these.
So he sat down at a table and said, "This looks like some sort of military facility. I see American flag, and it looks like a Nike base, and there's some buildings on the left, and most of the stuff is underground, and I see some green filing cabinets, and in the filing cabinets there are a bunch of files, and they're about pool, and it says cue ball, 8-ball, rack up. That's the kind of stuff I see." And we said, thank you very much. Of course, doesn't make any sense at all, but thank you, officer, for calling us and giving us this meaningless information, but we'll pass it on to the CIA and see what they say. It turns out that the target was actually a log cabin in West Virginia that one of the CIA guys had built. However, about 100 yards away was the entrance to a super-secret national security agency site. Now, I'm hesitating here because I'm trying to remember how our contract monitor, Kit Green, I think that he was able to look at the map, the classified map at the CIA. They said, why did Ingo Swann and Pat Price describe this military base? Is there a military base or a Nike base? And they could see that the entrance to a secret base was about 100 yards past this guy's cabin. So Kit Green went there, because it obviously wasn't describing the cabin, but he was very interested that two different psychics in California described the same erroneous thing. But he got there and he saw that it looked like a Nike base, had big antennas there, had a building. He talked to the owner of the facility, which was the NSA, and he said, yes, indeed, we do have filing cabinets downstairs. And an ongoing program was called Cue Ball.
Oh, boy.
So what Pat Price was able to do is psychically reach into the safe 3,000 miles away and come up with top-secret active code words for ongoing programs. Now, that caused a huge amount of problem for our contract monitor. The NSA wants to know, why are you at the CIA targeting psychics on our secret site? That's certainly not a very smart thing to do. And then the CIA and the NSA came to California and said, what are you guys doing describing a secret facility with code words where you were supposed to describe a guy's log cabin? Well, why did you do that? And what Pat Price said is, well, the more you hide something, the more it shines like a beacon in psychic space.
Oh, wow.
You may have sent us to a log cabin, but once we're in psychic space in that neighborhood, certainly this NSA site is going to be the most exciting thing around, and that's why we described it. And we got to successfully renew our program. Probably several years of renewals came by the fact that we could reach into a facility and read the place.
Now, how long did Price work with you?
He worked with us about 2 years. After the NSA caper, we then went to the CIA and wanted an ongoing program, and the director of intelligence, John McMahon, who was head of intelligence at the CIA, interviewed us, and he liked the data we saw, and he knew about our success with the NSA. He said, well, we'll support you if you can describe a site that's of national security consequence outside of the U.S. We have a place in Russia that we really need to know about. So 2 weeks later, another CIA guy came to our lab, gave me coordinates, latitude and longitude, and I went into my shielded room with Pat Price. Shielded room is like a phone booth covered with screening. And Price said, well, I'm psychically...
The time is 3:00 p.m.
That's my computer telling me what time it is.
That's always helpful.
So what Price says is, I'm psychically lying on top of a building here. There's a huge crane rolling back and forth over my body.
Huh.
It feels very nice lying out in the sun. And this crane is the biggest crane I've ever seen. It's like a giant A-frame crane, has 4 wheels on each side of the building, and he drew a picture of that crane. And all of this Russian stuff is described in my book, The Reality of ESP. It's finally declassified after 25 years, so I'm able to show the whole story and show the declassified pictures.
So
So his description of the crane was correct. CIA said, well, can you look in the building and see what they're doing? And he described that they're making a giant steel sphere about 60 feet in diameter that they're welding together out of orange peel slices. And that was all entirely correct.
metal orange peel slices, yes.
And we didn't get to see that. See, the crane was known about by the CIA, but of course we didn't know about it. It was a top-secret satellite photograph, which they showed us after Price's description, but they didn't know anything about the giant sphere until 2 years later. It appeared in Aviation Week, and after that, but Price had already died, so there was no place for Price to go to get that information unless he would go. See, we live in a different world than most people. See, it's reasonable for me to say, well, here we are in 1975. I could ask Price in 1975, can you look into Aviation Week in 1977? They've got the answer to the question we want. Just go ahead 2 years and tell me what's in that magazine that's not yet published, but that's okay. And that would seem to us to be a reasonable request. We didn't do that. But we could say that one of the ways you could get the information about the buried spheres in Russia is to go to Soviet Siberia psychically and describe what's in the building. That's ostensibly what he was doing. But it's not, from our mystical point of view, it's not out of the question to say, well, if you can't look into the future, I misspoke. If you can't go to Russia where nobody knows the answer, maybe you can look into the future into the answer book, or look into my Reality of ESP book, which is going to be published 20 years later. The information is all over the place.
Right.
For example, we found a downed airplane for Jimmy Carter, and that had not been published anywhere until he wrote his biography. He wrote his autobiography last year. And can I read you a paragraph from Jimmy Carter's autobiography?
Absolutely.
As he asked our contract monitor in 1980, said there's a downed Russian airplane, the reconnaissance plane, full of interesting hardware and full of secret code books. It's in northern Africa, and we can't find it with satellite photography because it's in the jungle. So we're flying over it. We're looking with satellites and can't find it. Can you find it? And the answer was yes. And what Jimmy Carter says in a little chapter called Clairvoyant, he says, there was another experience that I've never told anybody about. One morning I had a report from the CIA that a small twin-engine Russian plane had gone down somewhere near Zaire, and that it contained very important secret documents and hardware. We were searching for the crash using satellite photography and some other surreptitious high altitude, but with no success because it was in the jungle. So with some hesitancy, a CIA agent in California recommended the service of a clairvoyant woman who we then consulted. She wrote down the latitude and longitude, which proved to be accurate, and 2 days later I was shown a photograph of the plane totally destroyed in a remote area, and without notifying the Zaire government, Mobutu, we sent a small team by helicopter, recovered the documents and the bodies of the plane's occupants.
Wow.
So that's as good a testimonial as you'll ever find.
Yeah, it's very impressive, especially coming from someone like Carter, who was sort of regardless of whatever else, he certainly was no nonsense.
And he knew science. He was a scientist himself previously.
I think he graduated first in his class in Annapolis, and he was the first admiral or head of whatever, the first United...
Yeah, he was a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
Nuclear physicist,
yeah,
right.
and he was the commander of the first nuclear sub in this country.
It's amazing.
Yeah, he was
amazing.
Pretty good.
But I went to a book signing with him and got him to sign the book, to sign the page on which he wrote that. There's a movie we've just made a movie about our exploits with psychic spying. Made a film called Third Eye Spies.
Wonderful movie.
Good idea.
I saw two iterations of it. Just saw the second one, and I want to tell you that I endorse it 100%. It is an incredible historical document. Besides being a very, very interesting and compelling movie, it is an incredible historical document that will be referred to for as long as people see movies.
And that was the Third Eye Spy?
Yes. And
cool,
when is it
and
coming out?
You can see a coming attraction for that at its website, which is thirdeyespies.com.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 4-minute coming attraction. It'll probably be in theaters first of the year.
Great.
We have a complete film now, and we showed it to a group of people at a conference. Everybody loved the film, but the unanimous recommendation is that we cut 15 minutes from it.
I don't know.
Which is what we're going to do.
Okay. I enjoyed every minute of it. I just wanted more labels for people who didn't know the players, if you recall.
Yes.
In any case, I have a question. You worked as a contractor at SRI for various government agencies, including NASA, including the CIA and the DIA. Now, this is a question I've asked other remote viewers who have worked for the government. And was there ever any tasking towards remote influencing?
I'm not hesitating because the Russians were very interested in remote influencing. During this period, we were interested in inflowing information. Quiet your mind. tell me what's going on here or there, in the past, in the future, far away. We're trying to inflow information. The Russians were interested in remote strangulation, which is something we talk about in our book. And can you kill the chickens in the distance? Or does a mother rabbit show up changing her ESP when you kill her bunnies?
Oh,
so the Russians were very interested in distant modification, behavior modification. That is not what we were doing.
I'm glad to hear that there was no
We did
animals
have some
harmed.
interest in can you affect a computer that's running in the next room, and we spent a lot of money unsuccessfully trying to do that.
I see.
All you have to do that is have it print some document that's very, very important, critical, crucial, that you need in 10 seconds. That computer will go haywire. That's all. But this is such a fascinating thing to me. I really know.
So the Americans were not interested in so-called distant mental influence.
Okay. That's so they didn't.
That is, we were not.
Uh-huh.
Other labs in America, not working for the CIA, were very interested in distant mental influence because it's very easy to do. If what you're working on, if you have a subject in a distant room and you're watching her on television, and then on a random schedule, you'll see the picture of your subject, and then you're supposed to excite her or put her to sleep, and what you're measuring is her brain waves or heart rate. There's a whole literature on distant mental influence where you can change the electrophysiology of a distant person, and that works quite well.
We had Stephen Browdy on Shattered Reality a couple of months ago, and he is a big proponent of distant mental influencing. I suppose you may be aware of that.
Browdy's a fine fellow.
Yes, he's a very good guest as well.
Is that almost like hypnosis, or is
No.
that a different thing?
I think it's
No, because the distant person is just relaxed in the laboratory.
Okay.
And then the subject, the active person, on a random schedule will say, excite this person or relax a person, and you have very clear indications of changes in their heart rate or skin resistance.
Okay.
That's a very William Broud, B-R-A-U-D, wrote a book called Distant Mental Influence, which is all about that.
moving back to.
But that's not what we were doing. We were basically doing spying during our 20-year program. We were interested in inflowing information. And even after I left SRI, I was in inflowing information about the stock market. We wanted to know the market going to go up or down, and we did that very successfully. For 9 weeks, we forecast whether the silver market would go up a little, up a lot, down a little, down a lot, and we made 9 forecasts in the market, and we were successful with our precognitive investing 9 times in a row and made $120,000.
Nice.
Okay, now that's the book I want.
And we're again in my book, Reality of ESP, we describe how to do that with a friend, how to set up what we call associated remote viewing. Where you see, you can't actually read the big board at the commodity exchange. You can't say, "Well, here we are on Saturday. What's it going to say silver is doing a week from today?" Because it's very hard to read psychically. But you can arrange for the broker to have 4 objects of his choosing, and one of them will be an up object, one of the down object. And based on what the market does, he will then send me one of those 4 objects. So if I were interviewing you, I'd say, here we are. Next Friday, I'm going to hand you an interesting object. I have no idea what it is. Tell me about what I'm going to hand you next Friday. So there's nothing to do with the silver market. And you will say, I see a cylinder. It looks like it's made of glass. It is a plain glass cylinder, and it has a nice smell to it. This sort of smells like some kind of sweet perfume. And I say, well, that's a very nice description. I'll see you next week. And then I call John, the broker, and say, what are your objects for today? He said, well, I've got a teddy bear, a book, a little perfume vial, and a coffee cup. I said, well, it looks to me like my viewer described a perfume vial. What does that mean? And he said, well, that corresponds to down a lot. That was my random assignment. So that if the market goes down a lot, he would then send me the perfume vial. So based on your remote smelling, we would sell silver. Next 3 days, silver goes down. He will send me the perfume vial, and you get that for feedback.
And some of the money.
And that worked. That did not work the following year for a number of reasons. One of them is our investors who shared their winnings with me wanted to do it twice as frequently, and that interfered with the feedback because they needed the information before we got feedback for the previous trial. So we're always one ahead, and that did not work. We're focusing on the money rather than on the experience.
About 6 to 8 months ago, I was trying to convince Miss Kate Valentine and our engineer Bill to get into a scheme like that with me.
Yeah.
And I tried to explain it to them, and they were somewhat interested but unable to get the whole act together, unfortunately. But I'm still willing.
Well,
I'm still willing.
You know, the Mega Millions
can
was
be-
only
it
half
can
a
be
billion.
done.
What's that,
It
Russell?
can be done.
It can be done. There's a whole organization. There's two organizations, actually. One of them is a big group of retired Army officers who formed an organization called International Remote Viewing Association, IRVA. And these are principally people who are interested in using remote viewing for different things. Finding lost children, gambling on sporting events, investing in the stock market. The other remote viewing organization is called the Parapsychology Foundation, and they're interested in determining whether ESP is real. So you have the scientists who aren't sure whether it's real, and you've got the investors who are using it to make money.
So getting back to Mr. Pat Price and reading things, he and Ingo Swan were two remote viewers who ostensibly could actually read some things. Am I right about that?
Pat Price could read things, and occasionally Uri Geller could read things.
Uri Geller. Okay, got Ingo and Uri.
Ingo could not read stuff.
Now, sometimes now with near-death experience,
reading is a non-analytic ability. The remote viewing pertains to your experience of shape and form, and is a kind of natural ability for you to say something green and round has come into my awareness. But if what somebody has written down is a word, that's really an analytic, artificial thing, and your brain really isn't wired up to do that psychically.
It's a symbol rather than an actual thing.
That makes sense.
And some people who are trying to prove or disprove, as the case may be, the out-of-body experience of near death have put numbers and stuff up on ledges towards the top of the room of medical facilities where people are having a cardiac arrest. And that's apparently the easiest place to find somebody who has a memory of a near-death experience going out of body kind of
Charlie
stuff.
Targ did that. Charlie is a very experienced remote viewing researcher and artificial and states of consciousness person, and he was very interested in out-of-body experiences quite a number of years ago, and he had a woman really tethered to a complicated brainwave gadget, and then over her head in the bed, out of view obviously, he had a 6-digit number, and he interviewed her. He didn't about her states of consciousness, and eventually she named off the number which he could read.
Amazing. So that was a little different than remote viewing, apparently.
Well, there's really a continuum from remote viewing to out of body. In remote viewing, nobody ever has a bad experience. Remote viewing, you quiet your mind and read what's going on on the television screen in your awareness. And in a out-of-body experience, you're able to bring with you as much of your emotionality, sensitivity, sexuality as you're comfortable with. So you can bring more and more of yourself to the target site, and as a result, you're more available to have a frightening experience.
Yes.
Now, I'm just a physicist, so in the laboratory, if somebody freaks out and goes to the management and says, Targ separated my consciousness from my body, and I can't get together again, that would be the end of the program.
That would not be good.
No.
So we didn't do that. But in working with very experienced people, like my friend Hella Hamid was brought in as a control subject, and it turned out she was one of the most reliable people we ever worked with. And I knew her quite well. So from time to time, I could ask her in a remote viewing situation where in all of these things, I'm guiding a person to a destination of which I have no knowledge. So one day, the CIA had just surprised us and said, I'd like you today to describe Brezhnev's office in the Kremlin.
Wow.
I said, okay, I understand what that means. So Hella and I got together in my little shielded room and said, well, I guess we're going to Moscow. We're going to describe Brezhnev's office. And she said, okay, take a deep breath. I'm walking down a wall. I'm walking down a hallway. And at the end of the hallway, I see a door. And it's a round-top door covered with leather. Leather is held in place by brass upholstery tacks. That's what I get.
That's pretty specific.
And I said to myself, well, that's pretty specific, but what we actually want to know is what's inside. So I said, okay, Helen, I'll open the door and we can see what's inside. And this is like a realistic dream, or what do they call the...
Lucid dream?
Lucid dream, yes.
Lucid dream. Well, I can open the door for her.
Huh.
And she said, yeah, I see the door's open, but it's dark. I said, all right, I'll turn on the lights. You'll be able to see what's going on. And she said, oh, I see what's going on here. There are windows right in front of me looking out on Red Square, but on the right is a great big desk, a big wooden desk covered with glass. And behind the desk, there's a door cut into a wooden wall behind the desk. And I said, well, that sounds fine. Why don't we open that door? And we opened the door, and we found that we were walking down a stairway, and there were computer bays in front of us, and I began to feel frightened.
Oh.
That I don't have a security clearance to be inside the security bays in the Kremlin. That seemed to me like a bad place for us to be. So I said, I think we've got enough information. Let's get out of here. And we ended the session and had some coffee. But that's a case where we were actively doing stuff at the distance site. And all of that. 2 years later, I had resigned from the program and was invited to give a lecture to the Soviet Academy of Science in the Kremlin, it turned out. And they said, is there anything you'd like to see as long as we're here? I said, yeah, I'd like to see Leonid Brezhnev's office. I don't have to talk to Brezhnev, but it would be very exciting for me to just have a peek. It is like the equivalent of the Oval Office, I imagine. So they took me down the hall. I saw the door with the covered with red leather. We walked inside. Red squares on the left, the desk is on the right. I did not ask them to take me down behind the desk, but everything
Good
that
choice.
I saw, everything that I saw was a perfect match for what she described in her remote viewing. So that would be like a continuation from a ordinary sanitary remote viewing. Tell me what's on your mental screen. To let's go there, open the door, turn on the lights, go down the hallway. So you can bring as much of your curiosity with you as you'd like, but the more curiosity you bring with you, the more likely you are to find a frightening experience.
Right.
I mean, Aleister Crowley wrote 2 books where he talks about sex on the astral plane. And McKinley Cantor wrote a book about that as well. So and Bob Monroe wrote a.
Yes.
So the idea that you can interact with a person in a distant location, there's a lot of evidence that interaction at a distant location does occur. That would just not be an appropriate thing for me to be doing in my laboratory at Stanford Research Institute. Because I could not, I don't have the skill to deal with a person who's having a bad trip.
Well, yes. In your opinion, Russell, would you say that there are still deep black programs going on? I mean, just as an opinion in remote viewing?
My opinion is that there's still programs going on at the CIA, because why wouldn't there be? I mean, for example, during my program in the first decade, CIA sent us 2 people to examine our program and learn remote viewing, and they then went back to the CIA and were doing remote viewing with Pat Price. And that was all news to me until Contract Monitor described it in the film. So I learned a lot of things about the program in this film that I'd never known before.
And the Navy had their separate program, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, the Navy also had a program where we were doing brainwave experiments where, again, Hella was the remote viewer sitting in a shielded room, and I was in a distant room, and it was set up so that lights would be flashed in my eyes from time to time. And what we observed is that Hella would get knocked out of alpha during those periods where I had the obnoxious light flashes in my face.
Interesting. Only seems to reinforce the idea that I had, that you were a very good lubricant in the whole process of remote viewing. Just having you there seemed to make it a lot more easy to do than with another individual. So
yeah, I'm certainly one of the more successful remote viewing investigators. Marilyn Schlitz was also successful, so was Charlie Tart, and a number of others.
yeah, they're both very good people that I oddly both had the opportunity to speak to briefly when I was at the Monroe Institute Professional Division yearly meetings, and they were guests. Charlie was a guest by video, and Marilyn actually came to Virginia to meet with us. So
Well, that's great. I had a lifelong interest in psychic stuff. My vision has always been very poor.
Oh,
So I think that as a child I got interested in magic, which is a kind of remote sensing. And then I could go to magic shows on 42nd Street as a young teenager and buy magic tricks from the magic shops, professional magic shops. So I then did magic shows. So I was really into fooling people, sleight of hand, illusions, until I was a teenager and began to discover that there was such a thing as a Parapsychology Association and the American Society, ASP, our American Society for Psychical Research. So as a young scientist, I gave up my magical career and began to read journals about the researchers who were actually doing magic in the laboratory.
Well, that is just a fascinating turn of events, and especially lucky for us to have had you on. I would like to ask you one or two more questions. Well, one is to just, unfortunately, tell us the ending, which I sort of know already, of poor Mr. Price. I think our listeners would be interested in hearing how he ended his life.
Well, it's a mystery. That is, although John McMahon said that if you're successful describing our distant place, then we'll support your work, we can't believe what the CIA tells us any more than you would think that the CIA always tells you the truth. Pat Price was extraordinarily successful, and we now understand that he was so successful that he really scared the hell out of the CIA. That is, the CIA was not comfortable having Superman work for a bunch of hippies in California. The concern was maybe this person could quiet his mind and read the numbers on the card the president has to fire nuclear weapons. Have the secret codes for weapon firing. And Targ and Putoff were really not suitable people for conducting such a dangerous person. So right after our description of the Soviet weapon site, the CIA made him an offer that he apparently couldn't refuse, brought him to West Virginia where they set him up running a farm. And he then was doing day-to-day remote viewing for the CIA for a few months, and then he died.
And
no one knows the cause of his death because no autopsy was done.
Now, I wonder, is it in an effort to smear his reputation that he was linked in with the Scientology people, or was he really a Scientology member?
He was an enthusiastic Scientologist.
Okay. And
there's no doubt about that. And a couple of years after he died, it became known that he was passing on transcripts of his remote viewing from the CIA to his auditor at the Scientology church.
Uh-oh.
So he was really a double agent in a certain sense. That is, he was working for the CIA, but passing on information to the Scientologists, and we know that for a fact.
Okay.
Because there was a break-in of the CIA in 1977 where they found the documents from his day-to-day communications with them.
Interesting. Now, your former associate, Hal Putoff, he had mentioned that Pat Price had found some UFO bases around the country, around the world, and then Hal apparently told the people in Australia that there was one there, and they said they already knew about it. Is this hearsay, or do I have the story basically correct?
There is a story something like that, and I don't know if it's correct. That is, Hal and Pat were interested in UFOs. I was not. Like Alice in Wonderland, Alice said that I can only deal with one impossible thing at a time.
Uh-huh.
So I simply wasn't involved. There was some kind of investigation that Hal and Pat carried out, and I was not involved in that.
Okay, I asked for the reason that
It was not hugely successful because I would obviously know about it, but it was sort of an after-hours thing that they were doing because they were both interested in the subject. But I have no reason to believe that it was wildly successful because then it would be part of the project. We would have done something further.
I simply ask because we do have a lot of our listeners who are ufology type people and, do maintain a very avid interest in that. So let us...
yeah,
go ahead.
So the good news I can give you is that I don't know anything about UFOs, but I know for a fact that you can expand your awareness to fill the universe and describe anything that's going on, because Ingo had as one of his formal targets, can you describe what Jupiter looks like? We at NASA are going to be sending a spacecraft there. In 6 months, we will have a spacecraft to Jupiter. Is there anything interesting to be seen? And he said, yes, I see an interesting ring. It's a ring made of ice crystals. It's not a whole family of them like Saturn, but I see one very crystal clear ring around Jupiter, and you'll find that when you get there. And 6 months later, they found that.
Oh. That's extremely impressive. My feeling is simply that life is ubiquitous in the universe, and that's just the way I feel about it, whether or not.
Well, I don't know about life, but consciousness is.
Okay.
I wrote a book called Limitless Mind, which really expresses what we're talking about. But the book that I wrote that deals with the whole previously secret SRI program is called The Reality of ESP.
Which is really a slam dunk, proving ESP, I would say, and I recommend it to all of our listeners. And I certainly hope that when your movie premieres in New York, I certainly hope to be there because I think it's a real triumph for the field of remote viewing and an excellent document. So you want to give us some of your books again and tell us, just in closing about the movie and what people...
Well, the comprehensive book to look at is called The Reality of ESP, and that's the last book that I wrote, and I had all the clearances, so I was now, in that book, I was able to include pictures of all the stuff that had previously been secret. So that's a nice... Reality of ESP is a nice summary of what we did for a decade at SRI. The movie is called Third Eye Spies, and you can see a 4-minute coming attraction for that at the website thirdeyespies.com.
Who produced the movie?
I produced the movie,
You did.
And the director is Lance Mungia.
Okay. And this will be shown in theaters as well.
Yes,
Oh,
that's the plan.
terrific.
Plan is to have theatrical release, and then eventually it'll appear on television.
That's great.
Well, I can't recommend both those things enough. Both your books, including The Reality of ESP. For a couple of years, I read and reread Limitless Mind because I found it to be... It was like inspirational for me in my work and believing in myself and what I was doing as a reader, as an intuitive reader. And it really gave me confidence that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I cannot begin to thank you enough for being with us today. We are honored. We are privileged.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, a living legend, so to speak.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to chat with you. You have lots of good questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, and give my love to Patty, and we're going to say
What?
sayonara.
Okay.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
Bye-bye.
Bye
now, Russell.
Bye. Wow, that was pretty fascinating. That's really your field. I couldn't really ask him too many questions because I am not as familiar with it as you are, but it is pretty fascinating.
It is just an amazing subject, and I really feel him when he says I can only deal with one impossible thing at a time. Because
that's a great quote.
Just thinking about what can be done with remote viewing, with out-of-body experience, in the sense of the way he guided Hella Hamid into Brezhnev's office. My own experience with going to the moon that time.
Yeah, you got frightened.
I really got frightened. I went. I think I might have said this already, but I just very briefly.
Repeat it again. That was great.
I was very upset when when NASA was going to explode a bomb on the moon, which was they were going to crash
crash
Clementine,
that rocket or missile or something,
which was
whatever.
going around. They were going to crash it into the moon. For some reason, it upset me a great deal. I didn't think they should do that.
Yeah, you really were.
I was quite upset by that, and I watched it on TV in the morning on my computer. I think NASA had a sort of semi-live feed. And then I went back to bed to just kind of rest and to think about it. And I began to almost, not on purpose, view the moon. I was meditating on the moon. And I got there and somebody came up behind me as I was viewing something that looked like a disused railroad car. It wasn't that exactly. It was dark. It was metal. It was obviously on some sort of a track.
Well, it wasn't a natural formation.
It was not a natural formation. No, it was a cart on a track sort of type of thing. That's as close as I could make of it. And somebody said, "Excuse me, but you have no clearance to be here." And they told me I had to get gone very quickly.
And you got gone.
And I got gone so fast.
So fast.
So
How
fast.
Yeah, that is sort of scary. What I wanted to ask him, which you may be able to answer, is they talk about universal consciousness, which is fine. I get that. There's like a mind out there that thinks or whatever.
But you're part of it. That's the part that you have to remember.
Yeah, but does it require an avatar, a body or something, or can it just float forever?
I think it's in timeless, spaceless place, which of course is not a place, but it's sort of like scientists often posit what was there before the Big Bang. And my contention, and I'm not a scientist, I'm an amateur cosmologist at best, but I kind of think what it is time and space are properties of this universe, and they don't exist outside of this universe. So it's always the same. It's always there. It's always consciousness. And if you do quiet your mind, you can join with this universal consciousness, which is actually both inside and outside the universe. I mean, because it's everywhere and everything, it's inside the universe, but it is also outside of the universe in a place of no time and no space.
Okay. But I was just thinking if it needed a body to play the piano or something.
I think that it's the contention of
or could
many.
It just look at the keys and go, play Misty for me. Okay.
I think it's the contention of many that we are, and I don't know. I mean, this is a theory, and I didn't make this theory up.
Right.
And that is that each of us are like little.
Pixels?
Not exactly. Well, pixels. That's what Tom Campbell would say. But in that fractals either. I'm looking for the
fragments. Pieces?
Fragments, pieces. Yes, but there's when you see all in a drop, you can see the whole universe in a drop of water, kind of thing. So we're each like
The
drops of water of the universal consciousness, and we all share a part in it. And our reason for being incarnate in this body is so that the universal consciousness can have the experience of playing the piano, as you say. But they won't get that experience from me.
Not me either. But, one of our guests also said something interesting, that everything does exist at the same time.
Yes.
And the human mind can't deal with that. So we invented time to separate these things out.
Well, I think that time was invented when the universe came into being, because it involves space and time are actually very much interrelated, and we measure time by the movement of something in space, even if it's just the movement of the seconds on the clock, or it could be the movement of a giant asteroid heading towards Earth that's about to immolate us. But if we were not beings of flesh who live and die, even within our universe, we would be able to go back and forth in time because we wouldn't be beings of flesh. Now we can go back and forth in time, but we can only do it with our minds.
We'll have to, that experiment you wanted to do with Bill and myself.
Yes.
Perhaps we should involve some of our listeners.
That's
maybe
a thought.
next week.
Well, that's a real thought. I'll have to give that a lot of consideration.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say Mega Millions is like too many numbers, but pick 3 would be.
Pick 3 would be good. Anything that doesn't have that super number is.
What super number
You
is
know,
that?
when it's the Powerball number. Anything without the Powerball number is a lot more doable than something with the Powerball number.
All right.
On the other hand, next show, I would like to announce that we have another major superstar coming on, who is Dr. Stanley Krippner of the Saybrook Institute.
Okay.
And he is a veteran of psychical research. As a psychologist, he started out in dream studies. He's been involved in the field for more than 50 years. So he is an incredibly wonderful guest for us to be able to speak with. And we'll be speaking about dreams.
Oh.
So, dear listeners, if you have any questions about dreams, or if you would like to be on Shattered Reality as an experiencer, or if you have an account that you would like to be read on Shattered Reality, please get in touch with us by going to one of our websites, which is shatteredreality.com. I do this all the time. shatteredrealitypodcast.com or shatteredrealitypodcast.wordpress.com. They're sort of twin sites that we have going. Please go to either one of them, leave a comment, and
They could pose a question, too.
pose a question, leave a comment. And if you would like to be on, you will have to send me some form of contact information whereby I can contact you about being in our experiencer
Well, if you were
corner.
really good at this remote viewing, I mean, you really wouldn't have to have them send you contact information. You know?
Well, don't you know you can't read?
You
forgot
can't
that.
read.
Do you
Well,
not?
he read the letters. That one guy,
The
Price.
one guy, Pat Price. I am not Pat Price.
I see. Well, okay, that's all right. I am not.
And I am also still alive.
Okay.
He
Who's the
died
piano player?
in very, very curious circumstances in Las Vegas that
Crazy guy. I can't think of his name.
Russell
the one with the
didn't go
rhinestones
into.
and all that. You know, that crazy piano player with
Oh,
rhinestones.
Liberace.
Yeah, Liberace. Yeah, well, I'm not Liberace either, so
there you go.
have it. Okay. But spell the fellow's name that's coming on next week, because
Stanley,
a lot of people.
spelled it's
Okay,
Dr. Stanley. I
got
think we
that
can all
part.
go with that.
Okay.
Krippner, KRIPPNER.
Okay.
And he was a co-runner. Not runner is not a good word. What's a better word?
Author?
No. He ran the Maimonides Dream Lab in
administrator?
Brooklyn. He was, founder.
administrator?
He ran it with
Executive?
a fellow named Montag. Boy, I'm out of my waters right now. Okay.
Don't look at me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but anyway, if they have questions about Dr. Stanley Krippner, this really would be an excellent opportunity to address and to get some insight from a gentleman that is truly a giant in the field.
A giant in the field. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's a great opportunity if you're out there.
Yes. If you have a question, particularly if it's about a dream that you believe is precognitive, this is the man to be in contact with.
Right.
This is the man who is the biggest expert out there.
Cool.
All righty?
Okay, so I guess until next week.
I'll be speaking to you soon, Miss Kate Valentine.
Okay. All right, Fahrusha, you take care.
And we're so happy that Russell could be on.
Yeah, that's great to have him on tape and all.
Absolutely.
I know he's a personal hero and friend of yours.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, goodbye for now.
All right. Toodles.